Welcome back to the Monte and Wolf Show here at Last Free Nation. Now, we may not have had any LCK competition this past week, but that does not mean that we did not watch Korean teams play League of Legends, including Esports Cup champions T1. And bringing you that action was Wolf, who was over in Riyadh. So how was the Korean team experience over there? Obviously, Gen.G getting eliminated quarterfinals was quite surprising, especially with their performance. But what was your takeaway from T1 winning the whole thing? Because they definitely came into this one as an underdog given their domestic showing.
I think it was really interesting to see T1 win because they were definitely an underdog, and then in their series against BLG, they looked a little rough around the edges. Even though they won, and the comeback win was really impressive in that final game with Carrier's Bard performance. It didn't feel inspiring. Like at that moment, we were all kind of like, "Oh, well, I guess if it's T1 Gen.G in the finals, like Gen.G definitely take it," and everyone was kind of leaning that way. There were some, top esports believers, and there were some people who were saying like, Gen.G might struggle if they don't take this tournament seriously or whatever. But nobody really read too much into it until they actually played their game. T1 looked really rocky throughout the tournament, but it's the typical T1, style of international event where you doubt them, they get better as the tournament goes on, they start looking stronger. They had some really cool...
They start to switch to more of their style of performance. They start to play the pick compositions again. Then all of a sudden they're playing Sivir pick comps like they were 2 years ago. And what's so interesting, Wolf, is that they can never seem to they get like trapped in the meta in Korea. And then when they go internationally and they start like struggling, they're like, maybe we should just go back to the old bag of tricks and play some maybe not standard meta stuff that we're actually really good at playing. And then guess what? They win because they're really good at it.
Yeah, they just eventually moved back to their style. The finals was a lot of just deciding Faker wasn't going to be playing an AD mid and they were going to be able to dominate with that.
Which they tried to do against KT. It must be mentioned. They attempted to do that. They attempted to opt into like the Azir Talia handshake against KT. Didn't work in that particular situation. But, I think Top Esports was exposed a little bit as potential Tristana merchants over the course of this event. And also, credit to Top Esports. They actually just had a very good meta read in terms of their priorities on 14-13, because this was coming into a patch that the Korean teams hadn't, and the Chinese teams as well, they hadn't been playing on domestically.
I feel like T1 was the only team that brought out new picks in this tournament, especially from the LCK, right? Like, Gen.G just had a horrible draft read in their series and got completely destroyed, giving over all the pick comp champions. They gave over Rumble, Ashe, and Sejuani in a single draft, which is just, frankly, like, I don't know who was drafting there, but that was a horrible choice. T1 brought out the Zeri top. They brought out the Yasuo. They switched away from the AD mids. Like, they were happy to play their own game, and they had some different styles that they had clearly prepared going into this tournament. We saw Top Esports be able to play the Ivern, which was really cool. We saw, Team Liquid be able to play the Ziggs mid, the Ziggs bottom lane, to great effect, and they clearly showed that they have their own style that they can play incredibly well. Team Liquid was very impressive at this event, I felt. I think a lot of people are just writing them off, saying that their opponents were underperforming. Fnatic had a really, really bad performance, of course, in that first round, but, like, their performance against T1 was quite good, and I think if T1 had not... Like, if Umpty hadn't made that top side call, like maybe we would have watched Team Liquid versus Top Esports, and who knows, maybe Team Liquid could have beaten Top, depending on what their read would have been there. We'll never know, but it was a really scary tournament for T1 for me because I felt like BLG basically won the series. Like they won the first game, right? They were winning the first game. Sorry, I'm looking at the score, but I have the numbers of which game order they won. So game 1, T1 wins. Game 2, BLG dominate, right? But game 1 was very close. BLG had a big lead. T1 ended up getting the comeback win there. And then game 3, like, BLG absolutely should have won that game. So it felt like BLG did win the series to me, which gave me like no hope that T1 was going to be able to bounce back against Gen.G or Top Esports. And for the most part, everyone unanimously predicted that Top Esports would win the final, just because T1 looked so shaky. And T1 clutched it out in the end. I think the tournament overall was really unique in that it's a new patch. Nobody's really scrimmed because everyone's coming directly from the domestic leagues. Best of threes. And I thought as a result, it was going to kind of maybe end up being just a low level tournament. Like it was just not going to be that high level. But I think when we got towards the end of it, we really did see some teams start to adapt and evaluate picks. Remember, we were playing in Saudi Arabia, right, in Riyadh. So in terms of like solo queue practice, that wasn't really a thing that players could reliably do. And then with a bracket like this, it's hard to scrim. There's only a few teams on the other side of the bracket that could potentially scrim you. The domestic teams are so far away, like you can't scrim LCK teams there. You could, but the ping would be so high that it's just not really reasonable. And I'm sure it'll come out eventually what people were doing in terms of getting ready, but from what I was hearing, people just weren't really scrimming at all because it was just too difficult to do so. I think maybe some teams scrimmed against opposite side of the bracket teams like a game or two. There wasn't a lot of time as well. The schedule was pretty, it was constantly going. There's not a whole lot of breaks. You're playing every day, so it really came down to who could adapt the quickest. I was very impressed with the LPL teams. I thought they had really good vision control. They played the mid games incredibly well. In a meta where it's often just two ADs in the mid lane, you don't have the Azir, the Talia, you don't have that pick potential, you don't have that big rotational power like you do, with those types of picks. So a lot of the time the game kind of slowed down to a snail's pace where the team that has the advantage just pushes control wards in. There's a little bit of ARAM action. We're fighting for vision, trading, visions wards around Baron, then threatening Dragon, side laning a little bit. And I thought the LPL teams had by far the most strict and rigid, but also smart way of playing out that kind of neutral game when they ended up having the advantage, especially with the Ivern where they could set up the brushes. Very oppressive playstyle from the LPL teams. They didn't end up winning, obviously, but BLG fell in the first series, top loss in the finals. But going into Worlds, for example, if this type of playstyle continues, we don't know what the meta is going to look like. But LPL looked really scary, and it was really fun to watch their playstyle, which is so different from the LCKs.
Yeah, I think, coming in, I said that I thought Gen.G and Top were going to be the strongest teams at this event. And so basically, I thought maybe the most competitive match might happen in the quarterfinals. It wasn't very competitive because obviously Gen.G kind of, I don't know if I would say got dominated because they should have won game one of that series and then decided that they were going to, basically, I mean, it was to the credit of Top Esports. I think they had a very good read and they did a really good job of controlling vision and objectives with the combination of Ivern brushes plus Ezreal and Tristana. And they did a good job poking them out. And also, I think they really had a much better idea of champion priority because we saw Gen.G like first picking Corki on blue side when it became very clear the longer the tournament went on that champions that could fast push objectives like Tristana or Ziggs were really the highest priority champions at this event. And like you said, giving away, Mako played very well in the Leona in that game as well, in that game one. And like they had the priority on the Tristana, the Ezreal, the Leona. They had the Ivern available to play, which is not a champion that we've really seen Kenyon play. So it really felt like a lot of the picks that were left over from the last patches were really empowered by 14-13. And, I think that the read of Gen.G's read of like Twisted Fate Lee Sin proved to be kind of old. I would argue, Wolf, that even coming into this patch, like Twisted Fate has dropped significantly in priority because it's so easy to, like, the way he was played successfully by teams like T1 is you run him in pick comps where he just ports into the backline and gets a pick. But there's just so much peel these days, especially as we go towards engaged supports, that it's very hard for him to survive a TP into the back line, or not get punted out by an Alistar or zoned out by a Leona. So it's like really, I think, quite difficult to make that happen with Twisted Fate. And we kind of saw that play out. Like, I think Gen.G really just had a very bizarre prio, which is like give up Rumble, get Twisted Fate, which is not really how this meta is working.
Yeah, Twisted Fate's just too fragile. I think there were some bizarre decisions that were made in that second game as well. Like the decisions where you're seeing this desperation out of Canyon trying to stop the top lane backs and then has to flash and stuff like that made me really feel like Gen.G rather, disrespected their opponents. Were very much feeling like they were the stronger team kind of by default and that they could do whatever they want. And frankly, it looked like Top Esports just wanted it more. I don't know how else to put it. Like, it looked like they really came into this tournament ready to lift a trophy, and Gen.G came into it like they're looking at their Google Calendar, being like, all right, we got to do this one as well, you know. And I think Gen.G will definitely bounce back going into the LCK this week. They'll have a lot of lessons learned from the tournament, and I think that we should take this time to talk about the Golden Road, because this has been quite a controversial topic, right?
No, it's not a controversial topic. It's settled. This doesn't fucking count for the Golden Road. You guys don't get a take on this.
I cast this. I cast this series, right, where they lost, and I wanted to be very careful what I said. I said they put a red brick in the Golden Road, because in my head I always imagine the Golden Road, like when I think about it, like the yellow brick road from like Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
But like there's no denying that people will always say that if they win the Golden Road, that like, but they lost top, like that's always somewhat tainted in that regard. But I agree with you, and I think basically objectively at this point, the Golden Road is established. It's your spring domestic season, MSI, summer domestic, and Worlds. Those 4 tournaments. That's what the Golden Road is.
And by the way, guys, it never, like, when in conversations, it wasn't like Demacia Cup or Kespa Cup was ever in the picture for these things, right? That wasn't part of the conversation. This is about major domestic wins, season wins domestically, and the 2 major championships every year. So it's not like not losing anything. And it certainly isn't, for example, back in the days of IEMs, we wouldn't have counted IEM Katowice in this. It is a minor event. And we know, guys, because here's the thing. It was an optional event. So by your own logic, if Gen.G had decided not to go to this event, do they not get the Golden Road? They didn't lose. You know what I mean? So it was totally optional for teams to go to this. You know what's not optional? MSI and Worlds, because those are contractually obligated, right? Riot is like, they can't just have teams bowing out of MSI and Worlds. It's like, do you want, you must go to these tournaments. Also, there's no way the players would turn down going to those events, because it's about the prestige and the competition to them. So I think this whole argument is just completely ridiculous. And I had been saying for weeks before this doesn't affect Gen.G's Golden Road. It doesn't affect it. It doesn't affect it. It was a new patch. As you pointed out, Wolf, no time to prep, no time to scrim, jet lagged, best of 3 single elimination format. So no, does not count.
Yeah, it just doesn't count, guys. Like I don't know where this like concept is coming from. I don't know if it's the Gen.G haters or what it is. I have no idea.
It's the T1 fans and Gen.G haters is what it is.
But like it's just a silly idea, but it doesn't count. Now people will always be like, yeah, but they did lose Esports World Cup, and that's fine and that's fair to say.
Sure,
but the Golden Road that moniker, that title that they may or may not get, depending on, I mean, right now it's looking like a little bit less likely with how that tournament went, but I think they have a still pretty good shot at it. Is not affected by this. So I just wanted to address it on the show. I haven't posted about it or anything, but
also
I
for
do
everybody who's saying that, oh, well, they can't do it because they lost, and if you lose, you can't Golden Road. You just go ahead and link me to where it says that. Just go ahead. Just provide me a little citation of where, because your ass is where you pulled that from. And here's the thing, is that there isn't a definition that anybody has agreed on about this. But you know what matters? That the people who say it is a Golden Road with the fucking microphone say it is. Not you. You can decide it's not a Golden Road all you want. But you can't just give me a definition, because here's my definition. And also everybody else with a microphone's definition that you listen to. Domestic splits, no Demacia Cup, no EWC, no Kespa Cup, no other nonsense they might pull in the future, guys. No IEMs or whatever's going to happen next year. None of that. Domestic titles, MSI Worlds. Done. Okay?
Done.
If you want to include Esports World Cup, I do enjoy, people have been calling it the Rainbow Road, which I really enjoy, Wolf.
I know you're a big Mario Kart enjoyer.
Yep, that's what it's about. It's definitely about Mario Kart. It's actually Qiddiya, the rainbow logo that they used. Did you know that Team Liquid, they were wearing their Qiddiya celebration jerseys, because the rainbow and the Qiddiya logo, just like the rainbow they were wearing at Esports World Cup. It's really clever, the way they made Qiddiya's logo a rainbow so that it could be tied to that instead of the obvious other thing that it could be tied to in the month of June.
I'm not going to comment on this, Monty, but I think that the Golden Road conversation is one that we're probably going to be having a lot in the next few weeks as we get closer to LCK playoffs and Gen.G's current form as we get down a few more patches. Obviously, this patch doesn't change that much, but I think the reason why we saw a lot of these different picks is because Skarner prio went way down, and then there were a lot of other picks
nerf batted, so.
Yeah, his laning phase is just not as free as it was before because his lane stats got super hit. They took his stat stick down a notch. So he still does what Skarner does. He can still pull you into a wall. He can go through walls. He can still warp a team fight with Impale, but he doesn't get a free laning phase like he used to. So I think it was a pretty good change to Skarner. I actually thought we were still going to see him a lot. I think we saw him once. It was G2 or FlyQuest that played it. I think it might have been Whippo who played it. Either way, it was not a common pick at this tournament, so it unlocked a lot of other different prio picks, and then we saw the meta kind of evolve at this tournament, not really necessarily because of the patch. So we'll see what the next 2 weeks of LCK look like on this patch, and if some new meta shifts do arise. But I'm thinking right now, bad tournament for Gen.G. Didn't have that much time to prep. Kind of thought it was going to be a freebie. It does if that's the case, right? Which it looks like it is. They just didn't really prepare as hard as top esports did. It doesn't say good things about their attitude going into tournaments, but I don't think it really says anything about what the long term for this team is going to be.
It might be a wake up call, if anything, Wolf. If they were really cocky going into this and then they get 2-0'd, especially that second game was a very pathetic performance from them. They should have won game 1 and then they just rolled over and died in game number 2. They may, this may encourage them not to be so blasé in the future because it really just. But here's the other thing: they could have just had a wrong meta read. By the way, guys, this happens at the start of every international tournament. There's a good team with bad meta reads that adjusts as time goes on. But the thing about this tournament is 1 best of 3 and you're done. So there is no adjustment period.
Yeah. I do think Gen.G will bounce back. My final thoughts on this really is just that anyone who's writing the tombstone now or starting to put the obituary out, it's 1 best of 3 that lost to top esports, who then lost to T1, who had weak performances leading up into the finals anyways. So it's a crazy tournament format. Super exciting in terms of the cool results we had, like Team Liquid looking like maybe they could take T1 out because it's just a best of 3, right? I thought it was really fun. It was really enjoyable to cast. Is it the best format that we could have gotten with these teams? No. Is it the most legitimate way to test all of these teams? Absolutely not. But was it a really fucking fun tournament? Yeah, it really was. And I think that T1 also, I feel like people shouldn't read too much into their win, saying I've seen people post, I think T1's going to win LCK now because they won Esports World Cup and they were able to clutch it out against BLG and top esports. Maybe they're just better than Gen.G. Maybe the back to back road is stopped. Maybe Gen.G's not going to get the 5-peat. I think it's a bit early to say that. I think it's quite early to say that.
I think Gen.G still does it.
I mean, I'm leaning the same way myself. I think they have a very strong roster that has a robust coaching staff that will figure out these issues. And Chovy, this is the thing. A lot of people are saying Chovy, it's a great meta for Chovy because he can dominate lane on picks like the Tristana. His Corki has been winning matchups and winning the matchup into Tristana more than anyone else has. But I feel like this is actually a bad meta for Chovy. I think when he actually has more agency, when he can play picks like the Azir, he actually looks a lot better because he can still dominate lane with the pick, still end up with a massive CS lead, still side lane incredibly well, but also make super clutch plays, like what we've seen from him. Whereas Tristana is more team reliant. Not that he has got a bad team around him.
Also, side laning on Tristana is super easy because it's virtually impossible to get caught, and you just get free turret gold. It's not when he takes turret on a side lane Azir, it's a much more difficult balancing act than trying to do it on a Tristana, which clears out a turret almost instantly. You can buffer out of CC, you can get out of any situation, right? It's It's not as difficult.
Pretty free. And when you have Tristana in the mid lane, you probably have mid prio, so you can
Yep.
probably get the void grubs, so you could probably have at least 4 or 5 grubs going into the side lane, so you can just bust up those turrets. I do think we're going to see a lot of Ziggs in LCK this week. I think Ziggs was proven to be a pretty awesome pick in this tournament, thanks to Team Liquid. In part through the bottom lane, but also in part through APA, who had
Well, I mean,
really
we had seen a lot of Ziggs, particularly in LPL, in bot lane previously, and like it has been outside of Team Liquid, it's been mostly a bot lane pick because you get the ADC in mid lane, then you get the Ziggs Leona in the bot lane. It has been really, really common in those scenarios. But yeah, I agree. I mean, this pick is just for the same reasons Tristana strong, excellent wave clear, really good ability to quickly take down turrets, get massive gold leads, provide deep vision because you're pushing harder than the opponent. As we saw from APA, to your point, huge ultimate value as well. Like APA played really well. I mean, he's always been a good Ziggs player, obviously, but his map awareness is generally very good. So whether he's TPing or whether he's ulting into the side lanes, you can see the damage that provides, especially when you start getting things like, Horizon Focus, Rabadon's Death Cap, that turns out a fuck ton of burst damage.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching him play it. Just because, like you said, his map awareness was super good. He was able to make an impact by like bombing a side lane, for example, with his ultimate, and instead of just trying to straight up fight around Dragon Prio. That was the 1 week read that I got from the LCK. We've seen this so much in the LCK where if you have Dragon Prio, say you're the team that doesn't have Dragon Prio. What do teams do in this situation? They don't have vision. They have to fight their way through the brush to get to the dragon. What an LCK team often does is just hard indexes into a side lane and then slowly tries to leapfrog wards in, and then eventually gets to a point where they set up a TP the flank, or they send the top laner to like the bottom lane and have them try to do a long wrap around, and they just hard force it. Like LCK teams will just be like, well, I guess we're going in. I guess we're going to do this. Whereas we saw the LPL teams, the LCS teams, instead of in those moments, hard index into sending multiple people to a side lane and being like, I'm threatening your inhibitor now, or slowly poking, going to another objective, pushing jungle vision. I felt like the real big problem for LCK is they just kind of constantly go, oops, no prio, better force it. And they always look for a TP flank. They always look for a flank, whether it's on a ward or into the bottom lane. And it's just so predictable, and they got called out on it so many times where they try to go for these flanks. And I think our best 2 LCK teams are used to having perma prio in the LCK, because the best teams where they very rarely lose the early game, they very rarely fall behind, so they kind of always get to dictate the pace. But when they were against these LPL teams and falling behind, they just looked super lost. And when the LPL teams didn't have prio, they found creative ways to force their way through, like with the Ivern brushes, slowly leapfrogging that in. And it kind of made me realize, watching this entire tournament with a magnifying glass, like how binary the LCK playstyle is. I think especially for these 2 teams, there's certainly some different reads of the meta. Like different teams do different things. Like KT pushes a little bit more into side lanes, for example. Kwangdong Freaks tries to set up a multi-man flank oftentimes instead of just sending doo-doo. But it made me kind of worried, to be honest, Monty. I was like, I don't know if the LCK teams are going to be able to stand up to the improvements we've seen from these LPL squads.
I mean, the LCK has won both international tournaments this year, so I'm not exactly sure how truly concerned we should be in this scenario.
I just want to see some improvements made. I do not think by any means T1's win was a statement win. You know what I mean? I think the Yasuo pick was really cool. Keria was robbed of MVP, by the way. Like, he 100% should have gotten it. Either him or Owner. Faker had a all right series. Did get solo killed at level 1.
I think Zeus probably deserved it for the finals, but for Faker, for the tournament as a whole, I can understand.
Yeah, no, for the tournament as a whole, that's totally reasonable. But I think if you're a T1 fan, you could be happy with the win for sure. No one's gonna take that away from you. But I don't think flaunting it like T1 was gonna win the whole time, like I see everyone on Twitter doing, is real. Because I mean they almost lost to BLG. They by rights should have lost to BLG. By rights should have lost to Team Liquid. And then we're down in the finals as well, and we're able to have some really good reads. Like, I love the draft shifts that we saw where they moved away from playing the AD mids, and then the Yasuo coming through was quite smart in that draft. I didn't see it coming. I think really nobody saw it coming. It was a really smart choice, and it was very clutch. But if it was double elimination, we had to go deeper in this tournament. I feel like T1 had to get tested a little bit more. I don't think they ended up winning that tournament. So scary to think of what could have been. I found myself rooting for Team Liquid, to be honest with you, Monty. Like, I know I'm the LCK guy, but like,
oh, your American spirit was coming out, huh?
I just thought they had such really cool reads. I thought Umpty had a fantastic series against T1 until he didn't. Obviously, I know everyone's, but he's the reason they lost. Yes, that did happen, but they were a team that I think came super prepared. They looked super passionate when they were getting ready to play the game. So we got to talk to Spawn a little bit, and he didn't want to give a lot away, but he certainly felt confident the entire time before the tournament even started that they could actually do big things. And seeing the West come into a tournament like this, yes, I know format does help them out a little bit. Like there's a lot of variance in this type of format, but to see a team come in confidently,
won that best of 3 for sure.
Yeah, have good draft reads, look like really, really clean in terms of their macro, running T1 around the map, like that kind of stuff I didn't expect to see walking into this tournament. And I'm not saying it means that they're gonna go on to win worlds or anything like that, but
I don't know.
It gave me a glimpse of hope. There was a little bit of a hope there, to be honest, Monty.
Some of us were saying start of this year that Team Liquid had world-class macro and got laughed at for it. I don't know which one of us, it was me. Not on this show, but I was saying how impressive Team Liquid was, and everybody laughed at me. Who's laughing now? Idiots. Anyway, before I do want to talk more about T1 because I think this is an interesting time to do it, and they did have a kind of weird performance at this event. But, before we do that, we have a new partner here on the Monte and Wolf Show, and that is ExpressVPN. That's right. It's coming to you. And, Wolf, did you know that Netflix has more than 18,000 titles globally, but only about 6,000 are available in the United States? And if you use ExpressVPN, you can access different countries. Go to Netflix, reload with that country, and it will give you access to all the titles available in that country. And as we know, Wolf, because we're both in Korea at the moment, sometimes you want to pay for the services that you use. For example, I enjoy paying for HBO, but it is very difficult to watch HBO from Korea unless I'm using ExpressVPN, because I would like to watch House of the Dragon, Wolf, and I can't watch House of the Dragon unless I do this. And ExpressVPN works every time. It's the best in terms of accessing content libraries that I've had while I've been out here. So can vouch for it 100%. And if you also like House of the Dragon, you should check out our show on Last Free Nation Culture called Nerd Legion with me and Doa, where we just talked about House of the Dragon this week. So, Wolf, how necessary is it to use a VPN while you're living abroad?
I mean, it's very important. Like you mentioned, not being able to access like HBO. Even in Korean Netflix, sometimes a show will exist, like let's say an anime, but I want to watch with Japanese dubs, with English subtitles. But in Korea, there's no English subs. Like you have to watch it in English dubs, or you got to watch it with Korean subtitles. So I often end up, before I ended up getting ExpressVPN, I kind of stuck watching like Japanese with Korean subtitles, which I can get through it, like my Korean's pretty fluent, but it's just not as comfortable because I'm really focused on like translating in my brain what's going on. It's just super convenient to be able to have that. There's a lot of internet censorship in countries all over the world. Korea is one of them. So, the ability to kind of get around that and keep yourself secure is pretty helpful.
Also, just going to put this out there. Disney Plus in particular is quite different in other countries, because you guys may not know this, but Hulu doesn't exist outside of the US, really. And so what ends up happening, because Hulu's owned by Disney, is a bunch of those Hulu shows end up on Disney Plus in other countries. So do with that information what you will. You may want to think about your Hulu. And if you already have Disney Plus, maybe you can just get some of that content by looking at Disney Plus from a different country. Anyway, great value is what the point is. And it works great. ExpressVPN, like I said, it has been the most successful at accessing all of these content libraries. So, of course, be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/Monte Wolf. Don't forget to use my link at expressvpn.com/Monte Wolf to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. Also have a great app for your phone, so protect yourself on public Wi-Fi, obviously, protect your data. Don't get that stolen. Let's talk about T1. Because a lot of fans, there's a huge amount of fans of T1 that are feeling very validated by this event, Wolf, and to a certain degree, they should. I'm sure it was a little bit rocky, but by the finals, it really felt like they had, gotten control of everything. T1 ends up, like you say, picking this very surprising Yasuo pick. And when I was doing my VOD review, I was like, where is Faker going? They banned Talia. They banned the Azir. Tristana was banned by T1. Top is picking the Corki. And here comes a Yasuo, a champion that I would say both Zeus and Guma are known for picking before Faker. So also clever because it could have been, a flex into Guma by R5. So there was an element of that there, but also very good against the Corki Ezreal poke that Top Esports deployed against Gen.G to great success. Because remember, this is we have the Ivern, Corki, and Ezreal, which really was very effective at coming back against Gen.G in the first game of their series. Very interesting. What did you think about the finals and T1's performance?
So I thought keeping the focus on the Yasuo pick in that final draft for a moment, I thought that we were probably just going to see Vi come through, and I thought it was going to be like Vi Ari or something like that, which we'd already seen from Faker. I didn't expect the Yasuo to come through, but they had the Rumble into the Cassante matchup, so it was pretty easy to take a risk on this draft. And the way that Yasuo's ult works when you get a knock up, so somebody's already knocked up, right? Then Faker can prolong this with his ultimate, so one or multiple people are stuck in the air. So Equalizer gets a ton of damage done during this time, and then when you come out of the ultimate, you're still on top of the Equalizer. So it's an incredibly strong combo there. And then you could obviously layer this with the feathers from Xayah, for example. So the Xayah pick ended up being very smart here. Not great in isolation into the enemy comp. In fact, quite weak into the range of the Ezreal, right? The brushes can make it very difficult to play Xayah. I did feel and said on the cast that I thought the draft from T1 was extremely risky and fell apart like a house of cards if they lost control over the game at any point, just because if your Rumble is behind, you're not going to be able to do anything in the team fights. If you're not able to set up for the knockups for the Yasuo is behind. If it's your team Yasuo from solo queue,
sure, yeah.
And it's 0-0-4, then you're going to have a rough time. Well, I thought it was a really clever draft, and given that they had an extra buffer game, I thought it was a brave choice, yet safe enough, because this is something that's going to really catch Top Esports off guard. And then if you lose this one, you still have that final game 5 to fall back on. So smart draft there. The Ari pick obviously was really good for Faker, and worked out in that game. Similar type of situation where you lock people down. You had the Rumble. The Kalista in that draft as well felt super obvious because they picked the Yone already, so you just go Renata Kalista. I think Top Esports were a little bit caught off guard by that, but when we were casting that, Ox and I were both like instantly like, it's going to be Kalista Renata. It's super. It's super
I think people probably thought because of the nerfs to Opportunity and Kalista that Kalista priority was way lower over the course of this tournament, but it does make sense in the context of what you're saying.
Yeah, just for the laning phase alone and getting control there, so that the Ari has more power to roam and make an impact. The Vi gets a little bit more powerful there. Strong into the Ezreal, just because you just point click lock down the Ezreal there. So felt pretty easy to play that one out, and that was a fantastic game for Faker. I think that's part of why he ended up getting MVP, because that performance in that particular game was so incredibly good. And T1 in this finals overall made smart choices. Like, there were some definitely weak drafts leading up until this point. There were definitely some misreads. There were some big fumbles in team fights, but they had Keria playing at his best, and this was such a great tournament for Keria. I feel like even in their losses and some of the tough series like against Lucky, he played super well. And I think people forget that Keria, because he was playing either Nami or Lulu for so long, and mostly Nami, frankly, because they weren't really playing that much Zeri, and or other enchanters or marksman supports for so long. I think people forgot that Keria is really good at engage supports, and that's where he made a name for himself on picks like the Nautilus, the Leona, the Thresh. And so now the meta's moved back to that. I feel like he wasn't getting credit for it yet in LCK domestically because they lost to Gen.G, and everyone's just saying like Keria Guma is behind Pays and Lehen, so it's not that interesting. I feel like he wasn't getting the credit he deserved during domestic during the domestic season thus far. But like, this was kind of a big reminder to everybody that it's a really good meta for Keria. He is incredibly good at these types of picks. And he showed his versatility as well throughout the tournament. So I think I don't want to say he's back because he was kind of always there, but we saw a glimpse
his domestic performance was not so great recently.
Yeah, but we saw a glimpse of what he can be at his best and what he was famed for, right? Even as far back as when he was on DRX. So that was really fun to me to see. And I feel like, sadly, I feel like he wasn't given credit for it. You know, like I feel like everyone was talking about Faker, everyone was talking about Owner. And to me, Keria was the big standout player for this tournament. They didn't even get to this finals if he doesn't have that pop-off performance in Game 3 of the BLG series. So I just want to give him a shout-out. I know he always gets like a ton of credit for his champion pool and the wacky stuff he does, but this is just straight-up, clean, boring, top-level support play. And I'm here for it.
Well, especially his Rakan, which has been criticized in the past, was one of the big carries of that final game. I mean, if he's not setting up the knockups for Faker with Rakan, if he's not getting into the backline with the charm and making those engages happen, like that comp just doesn't work, and they're not able to push their lead. So I agree. I think, both Keria and Zeus came up really, really big in the finals. Like Zeus also was kind of criminally underrated because his Rumble games were amazing. I mean, that first Rumble game he had, the ults he was getting were crazy in game number 2. I mean, basically like a flawless equalizer game for him.
Yeah. And he was coming back after like getting ganked and being behind in the lane or in the lane swaps, taking a lot of his gold away, but still bouncing back in a big way, getting some first strike value and getting some time in sides. Like his decision making was fantastic. Not to mention also his Zeri top, which he played, which was quite versatile into lane swaps and was great into the Cassante. So I really thought, Zeus overall.
I would say it was a little dicey at first when he decided to take barrier, but when he switched it up to the TP and so he could respond to the lane swap better, it worked a lot better. But that was a nice adaptation that he made.
Yeah. I think it was very experimental what they were trying to do with it. People had noticed.
But it's like the vein. It's like the vein that he pulled out.
Yeah. And like that became pretty standard actually.
And it's great because Goom is not a good Zeri player, so at least they have a Zeri player on the team now.
I do think that the Zeri pick will become a little bit more standard. I think he's not going to be the only one that plays it. I think it will see play in the LCK just because of how flexible, how strong it is, and also, there was proof basically in the pudding in this tournament that lane swaps are not in fact dead and still relevant. And I think the LCK teams struggle with that initially, but were able to kind of figure it out. I was able to talk to Gumayusi, actually. I did an interview with him that was unreleased, at least to my knowledge. I don't think it ever ended up being played content-wise. And I asked him specifically about Zeri. I asked him, essentially like, hey, a lot of Western fans, kind of doubt your Zeri. You seem like you avoid playing it. Do you have anything, that you want to say about it? And his answer was, I wasn't really comfortable with the pick, and he kind of dodged it a little bit, but he made it somewhat clear in his answer that he wasn't comfortable with it. He felt like he wasn't ready to play Zeri, at his best level. So they did avoid it. In fact, like he kind of said, like, yeah, we didn't really want to draft that.
I do. It is on an individual level, he's been better recently, but it doesn't seem to really jive with the way his mouse movement works, because we see like a lot of backward cues on his Zeri for whatever reason, because where his mouse position is when he's kiting, that doesn't seem to affect other players as much as it affects him. And so that's part of it, but that has been getting better. But it's really just the way that T1 frequently plays around Zeri, or the comps that they select with Zeri are not super ideal. And it seems like not just him, but as a team, they struggle because this iteration of T1 has never been the best 5v5 front-to-back team fighting team in the world. They're a pick comp. That's why when he picked Jin earlier in this tournament, I was like, this is a great pick for them. People hate Jin, but fucking Matt, T1 is one of the best Jin teams, if not the very best Jin team in the world. So I don't mind when they play it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, he said he spent
unless
a ton
they play
of
it
time...
with Yumi, then I mind it. But as long as there's no Jin Yumi, then it's okay.
Well, luckily we don't have. Luckily, that's probably never going to happen again.
Jin Bard into Ashe, great, love that.
Yeah. That's fine. He did say he's been practicing this area a lot more, and he's played it a ton, obviously domestically this season at the LCK. So it was interesting to kind of be able to talk to him and have that acknowledgement that like he's been working to improve his area, and all the stuff that you just mentioned is true as well in terms of mouse movement and the T1 play style.
I
But
mean, this year he does have a 37% win rate on Zeri, so let's not go too crazy.
I mean, I don't always just put faith in stats on like win rates like that, considering like some of the other gameplay I've been seeing from some of the other players on his team and some of those losses, if you know what I'm saying.
That's fair.
I don't know if it was because of his Zeri, but he's played a lot of Zeri. And it's interesting to see how that's going to progress for the rest of the season, because it doesn't look like she's going anywhere. And I do think Riot is going to bring out the nerf bat for the 80 carry mids. I think it's just
they've already announced that today, actually, for 14-15. They haven't announced the specific nerfs, but
Sure.
Tristana and Corki are on there.
So I mean, that's the thing. Like everyone's like, oh, it's an 80 carry mid man. I'm like, no, it's a Corki / Tristana. Those are the two that we trade.
I mean, look, I think there's more to it than that. Fated Ashes is obviously a very strong item that's helping AP junglers, and with AP junglers comes a need to have AD damage other places. So I do think that there are multiple contributing factors, and it's not like we haven't seen AD mids being picked. It's like, okay, well, if there's a ban, then it's Yone, then it's Varus, then it's Lucian, depending on what kind of region, or if you're Chovy or not. And I don't think Varus and Lucian are super great, obviously, but GenG's made it work.
Yeah, I think Lucian is bad, but like Chovy won, but he struggled, but he got it done in the end. It wasn't his fault. It's just Lucian doesn't shoot so good when he's alone. And I think once those meta changes happen, we can reassess like what the future of these teams are going to look like, because right now it does feel like it's a bit of a toss-up. And Gen.G, we discussed a lot about how like Canyon on AP junglers, it's a great carry meta for him, how well he can do in this meta. Let's see what it looks like when he's back on tanks. I think it's still going to be really good for him.
I mean,
because
he's spent all of spring on tanks,
player.
right? He was just in Sejuani and Maokai bot in spring, so
yeah,
they still won.
I do wonder though if those changes will favor T1 based on what we saw in this finals. Is really where I'm getting.
It should.
Like my final thoughts really are, based on the bans we saw from T1 and how they moved away from the 80s, and that's where they found more success, and pick-based comps were great for them. I do think that if you're a T1 fan, you're hoping that maybe this time they beat Gen.G in the finals. That those nerfs that you mentioned, I didn't know they were announced yet. But I'm happy to hear it. We knew they were. Realistically, knew they were coming. It's about damn time.
It's not a good meta. It's not a fun meta.
It's just silly. So I'm glad that we're gonna have that sorted out. I think that'll be good for T1 in the future, and maybe they can shore up some of the weaknesses they showed and some of the decision making and drafting that we saw from them leading into the finals.
Right. And like any meta where we're going to go back to Azir, Talia, or control mages plus, engage junglers or more control style junglers is going to benefit T1, right? And it's not like Gen.G can't do that, but it feels like it helps level the playing field a little bit, because previously it really felt like, holy shit, this is Gen.G's meta, right? And it's like they were already the best, and now somehow they're even stronger.
Yeah. I think my big like standout team to look out for besides these two right now is still Kwangdong.
I think they're going to get destroyed by the meta shift, man. Like Bulldog has been an unashamed Tristana Corki 2-trick this split, right?
Yeah. I'm definitely going to agree with you on that, but I don't think that necessarily means he can't just play scaling AP mids instead once the meta shifts, because that's what he did for the entirety of spring. And like Aurelion Sol is still relevant, so I think Kwangdong has a lot more in their back pocket going into the rest of the season. But right now, besides them, like KT, I still don't trust them. Yeah, they beat T1, but I don't trust them. I don't think they're back. I think they're still going to be towards the bottom. I don't know if they're making playoffs, but Kwangdong is the only team right now. I mean, D+ to a certain extent, but Kwangdong is the only team right now that I look at going, I don't think they're going to make the finals necessarily, but they're going to be an interesting team at Worlds. Like, I think Kwangdong is probably going to Worlds. That's. I know it's a bit early, but
I'm hyped by that.
I'm not that bold.
You're not buying the D+ 5-1?
I mean, no. I mean, we've watched the same games together. We know We know it's a little rocky. We know it's a little shaky. We know King and Aiming might just
Throw at any point in time.
run it down. They might just run it down. Like you don't know. You just don't know. So I'm not ready to believe yet. I think there's a pretty good chance that D Plus will also be going to Worlds alongside Kwangdong and T1 and Gen.G, but I'm not ready to trust. I'm not ready to trust. Hanwha, on the other hand, also has a bit of a Doran Peanut issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you guys watch some of their more recent series, you might be like, oh, because, legitimately, they played Gen.G closer than anybody else has in the LCK so far. So they had some pretty good games. So you might have looked at those and thought, hey, Hanwha looks pretty good. Well, you didn't see the games where Doran and Peanut were like brutally running it down and they were still somehow winning anyway.
Yeah. Not ideal. So I'm not too hot on Hanwha at the moment. I guess we can talk a little bit about the schedule for next week and where these teams are going to match up. Hanwha versus T1 on Friday. That is a really big one. I think
Gen.G versus Kwangdong, and like Gen.G versus Kwangdong on Thursday, like there's not a lot of time for the teams to get back. Now it's true though, so there's kind of two sides to this coin, right? One of them is, well, Gen.G and T1 have already played professionally on this patch, so they do have a little bit of a head start on 14-13, and they were able to see what happened at this tournament, talk to the other players at this tournament, potentially scrim, if only a little bit. But they're also probably going to be somewhat tired. Now, there is only a 6-hour time difference between Saudi Arabia and Korea, so it's actually not super bad jet lag, and they will have a few days to get over it, but they're probably right back into scrims, already.
No, absolutely. I think T1 probably landing an hour or two. Gen.G, I think, left around the same time as me. They're probably back already. I think T1 playing against Bro tomorrow is a good matchup for them. Like they're more fortunate than Gen.G in that they'll play against a really relatively weaker opponent in their first matchup, and as tired as they may be, they'll probably be able to kind of get through that one. Then they have the buffer day before they have their match against Hanwha. Gen.G has Kwangdong and D Plus in the same week. They have that same buffer day, but they start with a tougher matchup than T1 does. So, the T1 or rather the Gen.G undefeated LCK run might see them dropping a game this week. I think it's totally reasonable to expect that could happen. Really important week though for Gen.G. T1 versus Hanwha. If T1 drop that, it gets a little bit more interesting. Kwangdong's second match is DRX, so not interesting really. And then KT's week is also Nongshim and Furex. So if you are a KT believer, like if you are one of those people who thinks, oh, they beat T1, so maybe they actually have that miracle run to playoffs, and then maybe they had something special happen, summer KT, et cetera, you better hope they 4-0 this week. Because if they drop even any games to Nongshim and Furex, like I don't care if they win both the series, like the dream is dead, it's done. If you can't beat Nongshim and Furex, I don't know if you're going to playoffs, KT. I think you're definitely not. If you lose the series to one of these teams, playoffs probably not happen. Feels like to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, somebody has to actually take that 6th spot, Wolf. That's the thing. And like, is it really going to be like DRX is technically there right now, but is it really going to be them? Especially since DRX has had a bit of a softer schedule. But KT versus DRX could be incredibly meaningful, and that's the last game of the first round robin for both of those teams. And this is the last full week of the first round robin. Then it's just half of next week, and then we get right into the second round robin. So we next week we also get Gen.G versus D Plus. We don't get the T1 Gen.G rematch until week 7. That'll be happening on August 3rd, but so a little bit like 3 weeks from now. But that'll be very exciting.
Yeah, that's a really big one. And let me see. Let me look at the patch schedule. So 13.3. No, we won't be on 14.5 for that. It'll still be 14.4. So, would have been interesting to see that.
Just many more Tristana. I think Tristana is just perma banned from here on out, though. I can't believe this champion is like allowed to exist.
I've been saying this since week 1. Like it's so stupid.
It is so stupid. I hate this champion. It's like
solo dragons.
What doesn't she do?
AP damage, I guess. Like
perma prio, scaling range, split pushing, instantly destroying tier 2 turrets to get 700 like local gold in a side lane, insane dueling ability, a bit resets for team fights. Yeah, solo drakes, like huge damage to Baron. can buffer out of crowd control effects, so never
Can
actually
peel.
in danger.
Can peel for your team. You
Can
can like insec, as we saw, from some of our mid laners. You could jump in, flash buster somebody into the team, like, so you can engage as well.
And then when that
Yeah,
person
it's
instantly dies, then it just resets your rocket jump. So very
yeah,
fun.
then you just get out. It's free. I'm pretty tired of it. I was pretty tired of it like after halfway of week 1, and now we're week 3 finished. We had EWC. It's time for Tristana to take a little break. You know, last time she was like not meta for like 2.5 years without really seeing any play. Maybe it's time for that again. Maybe put her on the bench for a little while. It was really exciting when she became meta again, and Bulldog was like, "Oh, Tristana mid's relevant." Remember that? Yeah, I'm pretty
Yep.
over it now. I'm pretty done with it. It's not fun anymore.
And I think both Gen.G and T1 have learned that this is, first pick blue side or must ban territory. I think we learned that in the end.
Yeah.
We got there. It took a while of giving it to Cream, but eventually we reached that state of do not give this champion to Cream, and they can't actually do anything. Okay, Wolf. Well, I think that will do it for us this week. Not a lot of games. Obviously, we just had a few Korean games to discuss over at the Esports World Cup, but you're back on with LCK starting on Wednesday this week, or I guess Tuesday for many of you who are in Western time zones. Good times. Anyway, we'll see you next week at the normal time for another episode of the Monte and Wolf Show. Till then.